Well, welcome everyone to the Purchasing Made Personal podcast. Today, we're going to dive in a little bit on the history of tips and where tips is going. And we've got someone here to help elaborate that, probably more qualified than anybody. That would be our founder, David Mabe. So, David, welcome.
Glad to be here, Michael.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be a good episode today. So, for those who don't know the full story, let's just start from square one on how did tips come to be, right?
Right. Good question. It takes us, as y- the folks listening may or may not know, TIPS is uh, ran or sponsored by the lead agency is Region 8 Education Service Center. And back in 2002, I was the deputy executive director for that organization. And my boss sent me to a conference in Austin, Texas, the Midwinter Conference that a lot of school administrators and regional service center administrators and consultants, they go down to that conference. Anyway, Scott Ferguson said, "Hey, David, there's a guy that wants to meet with me. I'm booked. Can you meet with this guy? His name's Jay Bowman." And I said, "Sure." And so Jay and myself meet at the Four Seasons downtown Austin for breakfast. And Jay goes to telling me about he and some of his former partners had managed the TCPN Purchasing Cooperative out of Houston. That's a co-op that was started in Region 4 Education Service Center in Houston. That group had decided to bring the management of that co-op back internal to employees of Region 4. And so Jay was out of work, and he comes to me and says, "Let's compete with them." Um, I didn't know much about what a purchasing cooperative was in 2002. So that's where it was born at the Four Seasons downtown Austin, and the rest is history, as they say.
The rest is history, right? So we've got this new cooperative going. It's going to be out of Northeast Texas, Region 8, right? So what were some of the fun initial hurdles of getting that cooperative started?
Yeah, my mentor in the beginning was Jay. Jay was a former he was the director of purchasing for Richardson ISD in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So he had a vast knowledge about purchasing, and since he had came from the Region 4 co-op TCPN, he had a very good knowledge of how the co-ops work. So as you know, anytime you do a startup, there's challenges. We had no members, no vendors. We bid our first contracts the spring of 2002. So uh, that's just how it started.
Yeah.
There was about three of us: Jay, myself, and my secretary at the time. That's the three people that were doing all the work. Jay and I would go to conferences. Kim Thompson would do all the back end work. And now you look at it, Michael, and there's 40 folks doing
Yep.
that work.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, the beginning was tough, but it was fun. That's how it started.
And I remember you've said this before. I just want to bring it into the light is you were driving from school to school with interlocal agreements, right? Which is what was required, in Texas at the time and still is in several states. Driving from school to school, getting meeting with purchasing directors or whomever, soups or whomever, and getting them to join tips, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing started in Region 8. So our first mission was for those 50 schools or so that
Mhm.
were a part of the Region 8 network. That's who we first started with. I guess second was our move over into the Dallas-Fort Worth area, because that's
Yep.
where he was from. So as David is going around Region 8, Jay's going around Dallas-Fort Worth. Some of our first vendors were from the Houston market. Again, naturally, that's where Jay came from. That's where the
Yeah.
TCPN co-op was. So a lot of the vendors that were in the Houston market are spreading the word. But yeah, that's you just um, go out and meet the folks that you know and say
Yep.
you're a member of these other co-ops. Well, take a look at this one, and here's
Yeah.
our interlocal agreement, and so they signed on, and that's how we started.
Here we are nearly 25 years later.
Correct. Yep.
No, so speaking of the vendors, you're putting out bids, you're doing this, you're evaluating vendors. Do you remember any offhand of when vendors really started to catch on to tips or just any rock stars that kind of helped it get going on the vendor side?
I don't know about rock stars, but I'll tell you, I vividly remember in the very first bid opening, we bid those major categories. So we wanted a technology contract. We had a little tiny construction contract like HVAC,
Hmm.
and we had a furniture contract. And back in that day, it's not done like it is today where it's all
No,
electronic bidding. It was, people delivering a packet and we would
by
open
hand
those
with rubber
packets
stamp.
by hand right in the one of the Region 8 education rooms there, and I remember being at what it was called Room 1 in that old Region 8 building.
Hmm.
We opened that furniture bid, and the guy that was representing Verco, his name was I'll never forget his name, Ralph Turney, drives from Conway, Arkansas to deliver this bid. It gets opened, and I'll never forget Ralph looking at me and doing this, and I'm gonna knock on my desk here. He said, "David, when you open that bid, you're gonna find that the pricing we've given you is the same pricing we've given Buy Board. It's the same pricing we've given TCPN. But David, when my sales guy knocks on the door of our customers, David, it's your job for that member agency to say, hey, do you have a tips contract? And I'll never forget that. Um, and it's so true, that's why it's our job. That's why we're doing what we're doing right now. The
Yes,
brand, to get our name out there. All of these companies and all of these agencies are members of all of these cooperatives. What makes us different? Why do they want to say, hey, do you have a tips deal? So Ralph was that was a great lesson for me to learn that day. And here we are 24 years later, and it's truer today than it was then.
absolutely, absolutely. So, okay, we're just moving down the timeline here, right? Um, so you're getting vendors responding. You're opening up our first several key categories, which are still in play today. The members are meeting you at trade shows. So, at what point did it turn into okay? We've got something here, right? We've
Yeah,
got something evolving.
right. When you ask that question, there's always stories or things that
Yeah.
happened in your past that you remember that were key. And I think one of the key things that happened for me personally in those early days was the day that I saw a $7 million PO come our way. And And I'll take you back in the beginning, Region 8, go back to who they are. They serve rural school districts in Northeast Texas, right?
Yep.
And that was who we were. We're folks that have served those schools, and now we got this purchasing cooperative, and those small schools don't have a purchasing department, and we're going to be of great assistance to the small rural, not only in Northeast Texas, but around the country or around Texas in the beginning. We can help these school districts. And
Hmm.
then you see a $7 million PO come across from a large urban district in the greater Houston area. And you go, wow, maybe this thing isn't just for small rural schools. It's for any size. There's value in a cooperative contract. And to dive into that deal, what was happening there is that large urban school district in the spring of that year, they decided to put air conditioners in their bus fleet. And they knew if they went through their own procurement exercise, it would take into the middle of the summer just to get all that on the street and bid and awarded. And there would be no way by the middle of August they'd roll air in buses in a large fleet like that. So there's two things that came out of that that still hold true today. That agency knew who they wanted to work with. They knew the manufacturer, Carrier in this case. And the other problem was time. They didn't have time, and they saw that Carrier had the contract with Tips. They joined our cooperative, negotiated that $7 million deal, and then, so I learned very quickly how important timing is in deals that get done across the country with public agencies, and more importantly, the relationships that are established where someone wants to work with a certain
Yep.
vendor or a certain manufacturer, and time is a problem, and they can move that deal through a cooperative vehicle. It was an early lesson that I learned that still, as holds true today. That's a big part of our business, are the relationships that our agencies have with these vendors.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so that's that's the thing, right? It's you wanna work with the vendors you wanna work with, right? Most of us came from the public agency side, I came from the government side, right? But, that timing aspect well, the co-op's done, you know, the bid already, and it's gonna be compliant means of procurement, so, yeah,
Right.
and then I get to use the vendor I wanna use, so I love it.
Exactly. They want to lean on our diligence. They know that
Yes.
when they're negotiating their deal with our vendor, they know that Tips has done all the things necessary that's going to meet
Yep,
their procurement requirement, whether it's in Texas or any other state. All those states have different rules and regulations around procurement. But
yep,
once they see that Tips is checking those boxes, then they can move to the next phase, which is the timing aspect and the negotiating of all the terms and conditions of that deal, and they get to enjoy our diligence. So yeah, those two, that's what makes what we do fun, and
yes.
it makes us viable. But when you check the procurement box for folks, that makes you viable in this world.
Absolutely. Okay. Now we gotta quickly address something that is still quite funny to me. Um, what was Tips Taps? Because I still have people at trade shows, even across the country. I remember distinctly I was at the Washington ASBO and heard Tips Taps, right? So
Right.
that's kind of the next phase that happened. So explain in your memory what Tips Taps is and was.
Yeah, that's another good story, Michael. When TIPS was formed, the it, TIPS stood for the Texas Interlocal Purchasing System, and it
Yep,
had a state of Texas instead of the national flag, the state of
yep,
Texas. And we were doing well in Texas, and there was a relationship between my former boss at the time, Scott Ferguson. He had deep ties into Arkansas through the Texas Rural Education Association and the Arkansas Rural. So naturally, we start meeting with leaders in Arkansas about bringing this tips deal over into Arkansas. Well, you're not going to bring a Texas logo over into the Razorback world.
right.
That wasn't going to work. So, long story short, we created an Arkansas, their state flag, and w- and we called it the Texas Arkansas Purchasing System. That's where TAPS comes from.
Yep,
Then we jumped the border over into Missouri, and so we look at each other like, we can't have different logos every time we expand into these different states. So we combine the logo tips and taps, and yeah, like you say, I've heard it this week already. Yesterday,
Yeah.
I'm visiting with someone in Arkansas, a vendor, and that's how they referred to us. We did so much branding, so many years with this tips taps thing, it
Yep.
really caught on. And, right now, tips stands for the interlocal purchasing system.
Yep.
And but yeah, that was how where that came from. It was the move into Arkansas is where taps came from.
So you're talking
Those
about
people were very proud of their Arkansas logo, that state logo, and what
oh, I
TAP
still
stood
see
for,
people
and they
use
still they'll stand by that.
I still see people using it day in
Right,
and day out, it's like, we're not distributing it, but they've got it, you know?
right.
So with the expansion from Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, and I know all on our way towards Chicago, the Chicago area, what did that what how did the expansion happen, right? As far as
I
you've already mentioned before we went from 3 to 40, and we actually have more than 40, but that's just the people inside the internal office, right? What did this expansion start to look like?
the guy that was, I think, instrumental in leading the expansion was he would have been the 3rd executive director of Region 8.
Mhm.
It was 2012 or so. Dr. Ray Glenn became the executive director after Harvey Hohenberger. Harvey, as the leader of Region 8, there's a lot of things that he did in his leadership role with TIPS that were important in our foundation. But Ray Glenn was the one that had the vision that this thing could be bigger. And I remember him bringing all the folks together. Now, think about this, Michael. Back in
Yeah.
2012, today you're a program manager and there's like 15 of you guys, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Back in 2012, there was one. Okay. So Ray
Yeah.
comes in, he brings all the internal tips folks together. That one outside consult or outside sales guy brings everybody in and he puts together uh, a he wants a mission and a vision and a mission. And his vision, what came out of that meeting was for Tips to be one of the top purchasing cooperatives in North America.
Yep.
And I remember, after we did all that work, and you've probably done work like this with companies and agencies, you put together a vision. I remember thinking, come on, Ray, we're doing well, we're doing good in Arkansas and
Uh-huh.
Texas, but one of the top in the North America. But think about where we are today. We are one of
We
the
are.
top purchasing cooperatives in North America. Ray Glenn and that vision that he had set that in place and made us think that way and made us one of the first things he did. We got one person in the field. He hired two more. We went to three. He
Yep.
tripled our uh, program managers in the field because he knew you can't have visions like that if you don't have the support.
Yeah.
And then our internal staff started growing, but he had a vision that this thing could be much bigger than it was. So yeah, those leadership people, those former leaders in your organizations are important.
So the national mission started in 2012. Is that a safe bet to say, safe assumption? Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So how did that begin? Because again, you've mentioned this already. We started in room 1 with paper receives and rubber stamps, you know? How did that vision of us reaching more agencies, reaching a larger vendor pool, awarding more contracts, how did that begin to affect the internal, uh, we'll call it, the internal office, right? Our headquarters.
Right.
How did that start to change?
there's a lot of things that over our time. Let's just talk. You mentioned being in room one and doing that physical bid opening.
Yeah.
I remember when we shifted from that world, and our former administrative assistant that was in charge of all that, she loved that the day to open bids and
Process.
all those
Yeah.
boxes in a room. It was crazy. They'd be hundreds of boxes where that first
Uh-huh.
day in 2002, there was probably 6 boxes to open. But we moved from that to an online system that we currently have today, and I remember it's anytime you move people, you know, the the book about moving cheese, right? When you
Yeah.
move people's cheese,
Yep.
it just stirs people up.
Oh, yeah.
We moved from that paper opening world to the electronic world that we're in today, and it's just so much more efficient, right? And you get so many more people that can easily, uh, participate in your bid process than
Right.
being than mailing things over to a physical location. So things like that. Another thing, Michael, was way back in the day, our the way we accepted purchase orders was through a fax machine. You think about that.
Yeah.
It but that's just, that's how it was
That was this.
done,
Yeah.
and it worked fine, but I remember going to a meeting with, again, that administrative assistant that was in charge of the fax machine and Dr. Ray Glenn and another person. There were 4 of us in the room, and I presented an idea. What if we created a database where users could email their purchase orders into that database, and that database capture the data, put it in there. And if if that administrative assistant could have had a bazooka in her hand, she'd have blown me out of the room because again, I was moving the cheese. But as you grow, you have to figure out systems that can help you be more efficient. That POS database that we have today is still it's very efficient for our membership, for our vendors, and thank goodness we're not still running our business on a fax machine. All
Uh,
companies that
yeah.
experience growth, there's 2 things important in your growth that you always consistently have to look at. Do I have the people in place to support the growth? And do I have the systems in place to support the growth? And I think Tips has done a good job of continuing to look at new systems and employ new people or deploy new people in the field. So yeah, those are exciting things to flush out and figure out.
Well, on behalf of all the forward thinkers out there, we can keep moving the cheese. So
Right.
no. Okay, so yeah, and that's kind of leading into where Tips is today, and I guess, Tips is now national. We're present in most states, um, where and now, and you can give us the timeline on this. You're no longer um, managing all the commodities, but several years ago now, we created the Tips Construction Division, right? That's what your background is right now, and now you're heading up specifically the construction procurement on Tips. So, for those anyone listening that might not know, why don't you give them the history of that and when we kind of made this? I call it a branch of Tips, right? However you
Right.
want to call it. Let's dive into Tips Construction.
I go back to Dr. Glenn. He's the person that I sat down with in that 2012, right after we'd created that vision and mission. One of the things that I discussed with him was why don't we create uh, a construction division and have someone that's just focused on that? And just like you, Michael, I'm a contractor to the lead agency. And my contract before 2012 was to just help run Tips nationally. National coordinator, I think, was my title. But after that negotiation with Dr. Glenn, my new contract became focused on just construction, and we bid our first job order contract in 2012.
Mhm.
And back in that day, there was one person, myself, that was gonna run that division and focus on those construction contracts, and I look at what we're doing today, just in the TIPS construction division, there are 14 of us.
Mhm.
You just, think about that. It
Yeah.
started with me. Today, there's 14 that all they do is support, manage, and help with construction contracts. They have nothing to do with your mission and your work with your territory.
Right.
Our mission is, if it's construction, our group takes care of that. And one of the reasons I think Dr. Glenn and I came up with this thought, or this division, this separation of, there's such a, it's so much different running a commodity contract through a cooperative and
Mhm.
run a construction contract through a cooperative. Much more detail, much more complicated, and it takes more support. I have 3 people that all they do is compliance around construction contracts. That's all they'll do today.
Yep.
Is those members or vendors send those projects into us, we review them, make sure they're compliant with the construction contract, and give the member an okay or the vendor an okay to proceed. But yeah, that was the original vision, was that construction's complicated and the laws are so different. We have members all across our country that join TIPS and can buy computers or office supplies or those kinds of things, commodity.
Yep.
It's a whole lot different deal to put a turf field in different states.
Yep.
There's so many different laws, even in our state where the law is clear that you can put turf in through a cooperative vehicle. That's a big purchase for an agency, and they want to make sure that, we talked earlier about the checkbox of compliance. They especially want to make sure that they're checking that compliance box. So that's how that started. And like anything else, as the thing grows, it just takes more people to
Oh, yeah.
support that growth.
Right, and you hit the nail on the head. The procurement, whether you're going through a cooperative or going out to hard bid, the procurement on construction, and, you can call it, there's called many think capital projects, public works, all the different, vernacular out there across the states, right? Um, it's so much more involved on any level than it is to go buy, one-to-one Chromebooks for students, right? So around that, what has the TIPS construction team done with, like, compliance and delivery methods, even around jock and job order contracting for those states that use jock, right? What has that evolved into over time? I know you mentioned the manpower, but what exactly is TIPS construction doing? Let's just answer
Yeah.
that one
So
beat.
in our construction contracts that our legal team bids and awards, in the construction world, there are what TIPS calls, there's 2 kinds of contracts. We call them part 1 and part 2. A part
Mhm.
1 contract is basically what I call a time and material
Yep.
contract. Easy to So there are a couple of spreadsheets on file for materials and a spreadsheet for all labor and services, and so our compliance around those 2 contracts are just seeing if those contracts are, um, I remember our former lawyer, Rick Powell, used to call it fixed and calculable. So when you get a proposal in from a member and they're saying, "Hey, Tips, is this compliance? Can we calculate
Yeah.
based on this proposal, looking at those 2 spreadsheets that are under contract, is this thing compliant?" So that's the time and material world. The part 2 we refer to as our job order contracts, much more complicated, because behind the pricing on a part 2 contract is an RS Means, national price book or a Exactimate price
Mhm,
book. We have a brand new price book called that we utilize called BNI with an eConverge solution on top of that.
mhm.
Those are complicated. So the 3 guys that I mentioned earlier, they are when those proposals come in, they're having to check all of the line items that are in those 3 national price books
Yep,
and making sure not only is the line item correct, is the line item appropriate for the project that's being done. So there's a lot of work there, um, that we have to do to just to ensure to our member in particular that that proposal is per the contract based on those 2 spreadsheets or those 3 national price books.
absolutely. It always amazes me how, 1, the tips construction team and the commodities PO team, what they do day in and day out, when they're handling near now pushing 100,000 POs a quarter. I mean,
Right,
I'm always just loving on them and appreciative of them because what they're doing on the back end of us introducing people to the co-op, they're making it happen day in, day out, and they're making it happen quite efficiently. There's some that get less than a 24-hour turnaround, I mean,
right,
it just
right.
amazes me. It amazes me. So, yeah, so that's what Tips is doing today. We've covered some, stories of the past. Um, I guess to help finish this out, you know, we've got all these ideas internally of where Tips is going, and we'll talk more about that at later dates and all that. But really, few things, Dan. What most excites you about where the government procurement space is going, or how Tips fits into that? What's on your horizon, David?
I I guess what it's exciting to see the growth, of course, and being involved with that, being involved in all the relationships that it takes to, you know, to keep the cooperative running, our relationships with our vendor partners, our member agencies. But what I my focus will always be you see it like on the little backsplash here, Purchasing Made Personal. Your
Yep.
podcast is called the Purchasing Made Personal podcast. That was I mentioned earlier the administrative assistant that was disappointed with me from time to time on moving her cheese.
Yeah.
She's the one that coined that phrase, purchasing made personal. And what I hope that Tips can do, even as it continues to grow, is it stay personable. I want to be the co-op that's thought of when somebody makes a call into us. You're not going to get a voice machine. You're going to talk to someone and they're going to, if they don't know the answer, they're going to go find the answer for you. It's a very personable experience, and it goes back to old Ralph Turney when I said he knocked on the door. David, it's your job. It's my job, our job, Michael, to be personable.
I love it. Yeah. It's so funny. And you came from education. I came from the government side of things. It's similar problems, similar headaches. Even even now, when we get the comment of, maybe I was on the other line or maybe I was at a trade show, couldn't take the call. But when I call people back directly, it's like, wow, you called back.
Right. Right.
That those are the people we're serving, is people who are traditionally underserved, so
Right.
that's why I like it, and that's why it's so easy to attach to that, vision or mission statement of purchasing made personal. I love it. It's what I wake up to do every day. But, any final thoughts that you might wanna leave the audience with?
The only thing that I would say in closing is we look forward to continuing to learn how we can better serve. You know, we love to get feedback from our vendors and our members about what we're doing, what's working, what's not working, and we just want to serve them in the best way that we can, and we look forward to doing that. I appreciate what you've put together here today. It's exciting to be a part of this and just to get the word out. Today's about the brand and purchasing made personal, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, David, for joining today. It was a true pleasure. And if you're an agency out there and you've listened this far, if you want to join Tips and join the 14,000 agencies who are using us year in and year out to help procure, you can do that absolutely for free on our website. And if you want to service those agencies and become one of our tips awarded vendor, that process has never been easier. And you can do that either by going to the become a vendor portion of our website or joining in directly with our Ion Wave e bidding system. And until then, we'll see y'all next time.